This is PD World. I'm Syed SHABAHAT and you're watching Fault Lines. Islamabad's political panorama remained abuzz with a lot of political turbulence and noise. This time from Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf. The problem started almost 2 months ago, and Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf was ousted out of office. All 11 parties in opposition joined hands together except for one former party that was in alliance with Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf. And this coalition ousted Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf out and decided to take the reign of the government in their own control. In spite of taking this political transition silently and going by the norms of a democratic process, Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf rather took the streets and decided to hold processions and accumulate people to protest against the government. Now, accumulating people for processions and rallies is an expertise of Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf, and nonetheless, the political party remains very popular among the masses of the country. But the problem started with two things. One is that Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf, instead of banking upon its 3.5 years of performance, rather took an anti-American narrative. The good thing about anti-American narrative in Pakistan is that it's completely comprehensive, easy to digest for the masses. But the bad thing about an anti-American rhetoric is that it has serious geopolitical consequences for the country. The second thing that happened was that despite the clear orders by the Supreme Court, Tehreek-e-Insaf announced to reach the heart of Islamabad's capital called D Square, D Chowk, and this triggered a lot of action from the law enforcement agencies. Many arrests happened. Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf, as a consequence of all of this, could not pull out enough numbers and has again announced to come for another demonstration. What are they exactly trying to accomplish? Instead of taking position from both the parties, we have today invited a neutral analyst, a political analyst, who would try to explain what exactly is happening in Pakistan's political picture these days. I'm joined by Osama Nizamani. He's a famous political analyst, frequently appears on my program. Osama, I welcome you.
Thank you so much, Shabah.
Help us to understand, Osama, what exactly Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf is trying to achieve after the failure of the previous rally that they tried to bring in to the capital. Again, another announcement has been made by the chief of PTI.
I think so far for PTI, I think still remains its call for early elections. Now, unfortunately, what we saw in the last week in Islamabad and across Pakistan, especially in different areas of Punjab and different areas, which were certainly adjacent to the province of KPK, there was a lot of, violence between PTI workers and the police of Punjab. Unfortunately, I think one of the reasons was the fact that, a very different approach that was taken by the incumbent government, which actually relied heavily on dissevering of roads to, undertake different raids of members of the political party that is the PTI. I think that sort of created a very tense environment, both between the government, the coalition government, and the PTI, which sort of, resulted in the unfolding of this rally or this entire march towards Islamabad in a way that has not been seen in Pakistan's political history, which I must admit is certainly unfortunate. But as long as the demand is concerned, I think PTI still remains adamant in terms of, calling for an early election, irrespective of the fact of how successful it has been so far in terms of achieving that end. Apparently, I think the political party so far seems quite adamant when it comes to its demand of early elections.
But Osama, asking you as a student of political science, if the party that has been given 30% votes has been taken away by all 70% other opposition forces together through a democratic transition, why on earth would the party that had only 30% votes would request or would require to have early elections? Why not the mandate of the people that was given to these parties that collectively have bagged 70% votes in the previous elections would not be allowed to serve the people of this country?
Yes, I do not discount the fact, that there is a need for a more political dialogue between different political parties, especially PTI and the members that form the coalition government at present. But despite the fact that you're mentioning a very, very important fact that PDI actually got 30% of the total votes that were actually cast in 2018 elections. Despite that, I think despite the quasi-defectees that we have within the PDI in the National Assembly, the political party still, despite the resignations it has submitted, still holds somewhere about 125 seats if we include these quasi-defectees, and if we exclude them, they stand somewhere about over 100. So I personally think that it is it's quite a significant number, given the fact that it still holds the most the most number of seats that are being held by any political party at this point in time in the lower house is certainly PTI. But the way forward, I still think actually rest through an exercise which takes this political dialogue forward between PDI and the coalition government to sort of, walk through this impasse at present.
Osama, allow me to say that Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf, as you pointed out, still holds, in itself more than 150 seats in National Assembly. But if we go by the book, they have resigned from these positions. So the positions fall vacant. And at the moment, the House does not have any representative. I understand that these have not been accepted by the government so far. But when it comes to Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf, they have not, even one of their members have not so far attended the assembly. So, so at the moment, they are not in the assembly. It is only the parties that we call the government. Even there was a problem in election of the member of the chief of opposition. So how would you counter comment on that?
Shabad, I would like you to repeat your question because the volume appears to be very low.
You mentioned, Osama, that Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf holds a lot of positions, a lot of seats in the National Assembly. And on this, my counter question was that since Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf has already resigned from these seats, now the votes of the people is only with the parties that are sitting in the National Assembly. Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf has refused to remain a member of the National Assembly of Pakistan any further. So the mandate of the people, if we just go by the book of political science that we have been taught, or the constitution of this country, the mandate of the people for now is with the people that are sitting in the National Assembly at the moment.
Yes, I think it's a very good argument, but at the same time, if you have a political party which has held, let's say if their resignations hypothetically are accepted, they still represented about 110 constituencies, at max, minus the defectees. I think that still sort of reflects that there are 110 constituencies which are still in a way enfranchised, through this political party, and in a way that provides a legitimacy and offers a stake to the people and its representatives to have a dialogue across the aisle with treasury benches, despite the fact, they've resigned, they do not want to sit inside the parliament. I think the only way forward through this impasse is to have a serious political dialogue and negotiation which could facilitate some sort of, reaching of consensus or reaching of some form of rules to break this impasse. And I think the only way forward that seems very I must say convincing at this point in time is to go in for an early election. The reason being is that the sitting incumbent government, which comprises a coalition of various political parties, they have a lot of heavy lifting to do in terms of making a lot of unpopular economic decisions. And as a result of it, the political capital that can be lost as a consequence of it is very significant. And I don't know whether, a lot of these political parties would want to sort of put themselves in that position where if you see the breakdown of each political party, it's not so significant. So the question is, each of these political parties be willing to sacrifice so much by putting at stake a lot of these economic problems that it had actually inherited from the previous government? Would it want to sort of, put itself in a position by robbing itself of that very political capital that it currently enjoys? So I think it requires a lot of, exchange of cool heads between PTI and the coalition government to come to some sort of a consensus to not just help these political parties get out of this impasse, but also the entire nation, which I think as a result of this tension is going through this phase of polarization at present.
Osama, there were three pertinent points of your answers that I've noted down. One is the mandate of the people that you refer to, which you believe that since the largest party in the House have stepped out, decided unanimously to step out, the mandate of the people is not there. The second part was the economy. You said the parties that are in command now are taking decisions that are extremely unpopular with the citizenry of this country. And the third thing you mentioned was consensus. Now, this makes it actually further confusing, because when we talk about the mandate, if a political party unilaterally decides to walk out, it just does not give it the right to undo the right of all other parties sitting in the House to represent the people who have voted for them. And besides the economy that is in shambles, with the new government in the office in less than 12 weeks, the entire responsibility of these measures cannot blindly be thrown on the government that has just taken God's few weeks ago. Don't you agree that this was more because of the bad management, bad economic management of the previous government, that Pakistan has today taken the decisions that you believe are not very popular with the people of this country?
I think again it's quite very much arguable in terms of how the previous government has managed the previous economic the overall economic management of the national economy. I think if we take an analysis of the first 2 years of the erstwhile government, it had to undertake a lot of austere measures, which I think very much helped in sort of bringing down the current account deficit that Pakistan was facing, nearly around around $20 billion US. Unfortunately, I must admit that yes, in the third fiscal year, under Finance Minister Shaukat Tareem, the government decided to sort of let go of the austere measures that it was exercising in order to allow import to aid the import of raw materials that would enable the industry to sort of upscale the exports. I think that sort of did contribute to the fiscal liabilities that Pakistan had to inherit, and no two questions about the fact that yes, a subsidy was given over fuel, and also on electricity bills, which although may have helped the public at large to sort of evade the fiscal liability that may have been incurred as a result of those measures. However, I think it certainly adversely impacted Pakistan's foreign exchange reserve. Now, while that being said, again, I think it's important to look at the fact that the situation as it exists today, you have one major political party that just does not want to sit in the House. It wants to take its politics down in the street, to its support base, to the public, and you have a coalition which wants to sort of, use the House and wants to run the government and make sure that it is somehow able to provide that stability that Pakistan needs at this point. But unfortunately, I think if you see coalition government as one major entity and PTI on the other as one major entity, and if you see the entire equation, I think it sort of makes it still very difficult, given this, contentious environment that we have at present, the tension that exists within the domestic polity, which sort of makes it very much imperative that we want to have an unprecedented political negotiation to sort of get out of this impasse. And even if it requires going into an early election, to have either of the political sides to have the popular mandate to undertake those very unpopular decisions to get Pakistan out of this current crisis, I think it would be much more better in the larger interest of Pakistan's economy, Pakistan's domestic political stability. So I think we need it all the more to have some cool heads sit down and chart out a way forward out of this crisis. And I think all of us, I think we may all need to take a step back and think what's really important and better for Pakistan. I do understand each one of us have different ways of looking at this problem, but I think we have to come to some sort of a consensus by having a more democratic approach towards this issue.
And you're saying this to be a democratic approach if we go with the narrative of one party and decide to call off the current parliament and go for an election. But let's move forward on that. Important thing, Osama, me and you have been talking about, even in the same program, about the successful achievements of foreign policy of Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf's government. Nonetheless, foreign policy was one of the major focuses of the erstwhile government. Not only they just reorganized things for Pakistan and the region, but as well as took Pakistan's voice to the forums like United Nations, and it became Pakistan first time became, perhaps after the time of Zaid Bhutto, became the voice of the entire Muslim Ummah. Now the problem is that instead of banking upon its performance in the provincial and federal governments, PTI is solely relying on an anti-American rhetoric. And we, the two of us being kindergarten students of international politics, understand that if PTI ever comes back to a government, this will have serious geopolitical economic implications for this country. Would you agree with me on that?
I think there's certainly no two thoughts, no doubt about the fact that PTI, has certainly sort of, built its renewed political capital on a lot of this sentiment, which, despite the fact that, the erstwhile Prime Minister Imran Khan may keep on re-emphasizing that, I'm not anti-U.S. or my political party is not anti-U.S., but the kind of rhetoric that certainly flows through a lot of these political rallies, through a lot of the narrative and the communication that the political party is taking, it certainly has very strong underpinnings of an anti-U.S. rhetoric. And you rightly pointed out that when and if in future PTI does come back into a government or is part of some future government, it certainly then would need to engage with the United States, and having such kind of a overall form and substance of rhetoric itself can also have geopolitical and also economic implications. So I think it's all the more important to sort of practice what PTI is trying to preach, that we're not anti-U.S. If they're not anti-U.S., I think it's important to bring about things in perspective, to sort of dial down and a bit climb down from this rhetoric, which certainly can have not just implications for PTI as a political party, but also the fact that for Pakistan's own future. Number two, I think PTI should also do some soul searching to that, and also given the fact that it enjoys so much of support from the overseas itself, especially Pakistanis that are based in the West, including in North America, Canada, and United States of America. Even the fact that a lot of donations that the political party receives are flowing in from the United States, from North America, from a lot of European countries. So I think that certainly should trigger some sort of soul searching within PTI, that a large segment of the diaspora is sending in resources from these very countries. So I think any differences or any objections should be put out in a way that should appear and that should actually be done in a more objective
Osama, I'm
way.
afraid we are getting a bit off the surface. So let me rephrase my question. Suppose the elections are called today. Suppose PTI clean sweeps. Suppose they have a two-third majority. Suppose Imran Khan is elected as Prime Minister once again, and tomorrow he is sitting, or as his finance minister or his foreign minister, you are sitting in the FATF again, in the FATF headquarters again, and trying to convince them that Pakistan should be pulled out of this grey list that is hampering our economy so badly. How difficult it would be for you as representative of PTI's government to undo the political clout or influence that United States have on all these international institutions, given the fact that your government has been elected on an anti-American rhetoric?
So, well, first things first, I would not like to be on a lighter note. I would not like to be in that position, Shabahat. I think I'm doing quite a good job as an analyst, and I would like to stay as such. But I think, yes, you're making a very valid point. This is the very reason why I'm saying that, it's the entire rhetoric over the United States should instead be thought through. It should be reflected upon. And I think it should be dialed down, given the fact that, Pakistan and United States of America, even under the erstwhile government, enjoyed the highest trade in the history of the two countries, and the bilateral trade history of the two countries. So I think that requires some serious level of soul searching from PTI also to that end. And along with this, I think it's important to sort of remember the fact that, domestically, in terms of domestic rhetoric, yes, it may and it will sell like a hotcake till elections. But yes, when and if they do come back in government, then, the hard reality and the hard fact is that, they would certainly need to be engaging with the United States. And I completely agree with your point on that end, that it requires a more pragmatism when it comes to to the length and to the breadth of which you can be using interstate relations for domestic politics.
Thank you very much, Osama Nizamani, for being my guest in today's program.
Thank you so much, Shabahat. It has always been a pleasure.
Ladies and gentlemen, this was Osama Nizamani, famous analyst, political analyst, and he has a very interesting angle to it. So while we are talking about this political crisis, he made 2 points very clear. And first is that despite selling this anti-USA rhetoric to the domestic audience, it'll be extremely difficult to be sold to the international audience once if ever Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf is going to get control on the power again. And the second thing that he said was that the all focus of Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf's politics today is on the call of early elections, whereas all 11 other political entities in the National Assembly of Pakistan are persistent on the fact that they have an ambition to enjoy the mandate given by the citizenry of this country until the time of this National Assembly expires. We'll take a break here and we'll join you with the second segment of program. Stay with us.
कुछ जुल्म की देखे से एक आग लगी सीने में मिलकर जो बने थे ताकत जब मकसद था जीने में जब पास नजरिया था अपने फिर रोक सका ना कोई यूं पाकिस्तान बना था
Welcome back. Pakistan's political picture is very important, but more important is the fact that Pakistan as an economic entity needs to survive and needs to thrive. The political significance of this country comes out of the economic significance of this country. The political empowerment comes out of the economic empowerment. And the economic situation of the country remained quite dismal during the last several weeks, particularly ever since the new government took guard. They gave a very haunting picture of the economy. There were various areas of concerns for the political and economic management of this country. But on front of economic management, debts, the foreign debts in particular, inflation, trade deficit, subsidies, high prices of oil in the international market, and the risk of default were the problems that were hovering on the head of this country until the finance minister of Pakistan recently gave a sweeping statement in one of the talk shows that he has dealt with the problems with regards to IMF and have reached on a joint consultation. After joint consultation with IMF management, he has reached a conclusion after which the risk of default, he has said, is formally over. Our team has prepared a package. Watch the package before I bring my guest to this part of program.
Pakistan faces $6.4 billion in dollar debt due over the next 3 years as Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif's new government is trying to meet bailout terms set by the IMF. The country, under pressure to keep its economy afloat and avert a sovereign default, needs about $3.16 billion to pay dollar bonds and loans this year, $1.52 billion next year, and $1.71 billion in 2024, according to data compiled by Bloomberg. With a $45 billion trade deficit in the current fiscal year to June and foreign exchange reserves at $10.1 billion, or less than 2 months of imports, Pakistan faces the prospect of default for the second time in its history. The external debt due in the coming fiscal year starting July is estimated to be bigger by Fitch Ratings. The ratings firm includes bilateral obligation of $3 billion owed to Saudi Arabia in time deposits and $4 billion from China's State Administration of Foreign Exchange. Pakistan might seek debt restructuring with IMF support, and in recent times, debt restructuring has been sought under explicit or implicit threat of default, such as Mexico 1982-1990, Argentina 1999-2005, and Greece 2010-2015, among others. A 2002 IMF report concurs that restructuring of debt can increase returns to all parties in cases where debt is unsustainable.
My guest in this part of program is Dr. Abid Qayyum Suleri. He is a famous, renowned economist of this country and does not need any detailed introduction. Abid Qayyum sir, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much.
So we are talking about the risk of default to begin with. Now, I just saw a recent interview of Pakistan's finance minister, and he categorically mentioned that Pakistan is now formally out of the risk of a default that was hovering on the head of the country, with few tough decisions that his government has decided to take and has rather implemented as well. Please comment on his statement and tell us how far we are from the risk of an ultimate default.
There would be many analysts who would be comparing Pakistan with Sri Lanka and telling that Pakistan is on the verge of default. I slightly disagree with them, and my reasons are that it's comparing Pakistan's economy with Sri Lankan economy is just like comparing apples with oranges. Sri Lanka's economy total size is $80 billion. Pakistan's economy is almost $400 billion. Sri Lanka's economy's main dependence was on tourism, which was hit very badly due to COVID-19. Pakistan has a vibrant export and remittances, and Pakistan is almost self-sufficient in its staple food, which is wheat, compared to Sri Lanka that had to import all food items from India, especially, and other countries. So one was not forcing that sort of default, but just current account deficit and balance of payment in the short term, those were imminent. But again, there is this inherent problem with our economic growth. We have seen whenever we grew at the rate of 5+, 5.5+ for more than 2 years, we find ourselves in current account deficit. And the reason is very simple. A, our growth is consumption-led. B, our productivity, especially industrial and manufacturing productivity, services productivity, is not as that could match our demand when we grow that high. So all of a sudden, the imports, they increases, and when the import increases, we find ourselves in current account deficit, which means a gap of dollars. And in order to bridge that gap, one either has to do more exports, which unfortunately we have again some structural problem to increase our exports. Number two is remittances, which are already at a saturation point. Third is investment, which due to geopolitical issues and due to some domestic political issues, the political uncertainty is not coming to Pakistan anymore. And the fourth one is taking loan. Now, State Bank of Pakistan only 2 weeks ago gave an estimate that by June 2023, we would require $46 billion external financing apart from on top of our exports and remittances. And if we are not in an IMF program, it would be difficult to manage it. So that was the emergency in which Pakistan had to go to IMF once again. I had to resume the package. And here I must also say for my viewers that none of the government, not the incumbent government, neither the PTI government, none of the government in Pakistan so far have gone to IMF on its own will. So each and every government, when it comes into power, when they find themselves in an economic mess, they go to IMF very reluctantly, and of course they shift all the blame, rightly or wrongly, on their predecessors. So this is what is happening right now once again. But I'm glad that this blame game, finally the government could move on from it, and government decided to take some tough decisions. Of course, it would erode its political capital, but right now it was extremely important to resuscitate Pakistan's economy, and for that purpose, rolling back fuel subsidies, are increasing electricity tariffs, which you would see very soon, are presenting a tough budget, which again you would witness on 10th of June, are some of the prior conditions of IMF, without which IMF program would not revive, and without which Pakistan will not be able to manage the $46 billion that it requires to survive until June 2023.
Dr. A pertinent point that you have made, and I also heard this from a speech of Finance Minister as well. One of the few things that IMF always dictates us, one of the few remedies that they present is slowing down of the economy. Now, for a common person like me, this actually sounds very criminal, that you are revising the interest rate to slow down the economic activity in the country so that the industrial process or the economic process takes a halt. If banks are giving you 13 to 14% return without any exposure of external risks, who would risk his capital in an economy that has an inflation that is running out of control? So as an expert of economics, tell us if you believe this to be the right way to deal with the problem, slowing down the economy by revising the interest rates.
Let me say why we say slowing down economy. If we take an old model of car at superhighway or at a motorway and start running it at its full speed, 120, 130 kilometer per hour, very soon we'll find that the radiator is heating up and the engine is heating up. So same happens with the economies like Pakistan, who don't have their sufficient productive capacity, the industry and manufacturing and the services sector production. Now, when the economy grows beyond 5.5%, what happens? It increases per capita income. When per capita income increases, what happens? There is a demand for more industrial goods. There is a demand for more manufactured goods. There is a demand for more services. Now, if per capita income is increasing for 2 or 3 consecutive years, we will find that there will be more demand for cars, there will be more demand for petrol, there would be more demand for diesel, there would be more demand for going abroad, going to Hajj, Umrah, sending students to international universities abroad, which are very good things to do. But it has done its toll on foreign currency reserves because in order to meet all that demand, we require dollars. So it's not a rupee crisis; it's a dollar crisis. So if the dollars are not coming, then of course country starts going to a current account deficit, and that's when IMF comes. And IMF tells you that slow down your speed because your car is now hitting up, so you have to apply brakes, or if not the brakes, go into second, third gear, so that your car can actually manage the engine condition. So either replace the engine, which in our case is our medium to long-term growth strategies through which we want to, of course, improve our productivity, we want to improve our efficiency, we want to bring more investment here. And if that's not the case, then of course, slowing down the economy is the sane approach. That pinches, that hurts, but unfortunately that's the truth.
Doctor, thank you very much for making this so comprehensive. Another problem, another area of concern for many people in this country is the rate of rupee versus US dollar. Now, not only rupee has lost its value tremendously ever since the new government has taken guard, but also the fact that the value of US dollar versus all other international currencies have also gained some grounds. Dollar is gaining grounds versus currencies like euro and pound sterling as well. So do you see this deal that we have just negotiated and with, as you said, budget coming on 10th of June, this to go back a bit, or do you believe that dollar is likely to stay where it is? Or are you happy with the value of rupee versus the dollar at the moment? You believe this is rightly driven out of the demand and supply?
Well, of course, no one is happy when the domestic currency depreciates. But again, let me explain why it happens. Partly the answer that I gave to your previous question, if each one of us we want to buy an imported car, if we want to buy imported food, if we want to visit the foreign places, if we are consuming everything that is imported, we are actually spending dollars. Now, if the dollars are not there, the exchange rate in open market, that would start increasing because there are less dollars and there is more demand. So right now, it's as you rightly mentioned, it was the strength of dollar, but also it was all the oil manufacturing, marketing companies and all the refineries that had to buy dollars from the market in order to pay for very expensive petrol and diesel that Pakistan was importing. It was all the car manufacturers who were importing completely built units to meet the demand of consumers. So there was more pressure on dollar, and the value of rupee was depreciating. There is only one way of controlling the value of rupee, and that is if you have sufficient dollars in your reserves, you can keep on selling your dollar, and the domestic currency would remain stable, as we find in many of the petro-exporting Gulf countries, Saudi Arabia and UAE and Kuwait and Qatar. You can see their exchange rate. They're stable for last 10, 15, 20 years because they have enough foreign exchange reserves. Every time there is a demand for dollar in their foreign exchange market, they can sell a couple of $1 billion from their reserves, and their domestic currency remains stable. Unfortunately, in our case, that's not the case. We are already almost finishing our reserves, so government cannot support the rate of rupee right now. At that moment, this deal, IMF deal, it would be start of provide a cushion so that the value of rupee would not slide down further if it doesn't appreciate. At least I don't see it going down further, because now all the speculative buyers, they know that dollars are coming to Pakistan. With the IMF deal, what was happening that Saudi Arabia and China, they had also linked rolling over the support, which means deposits in state bank, with Pakistan's deal with the IMF. So now everyone knows that there would be at least $6 billion coming from Saudi Arabia and China in the state bank reserves. IMF would also provide almost $1 billion, and there would be other steady flow of dollars from World Bank and ADB. So Pakistan would have sufficient dollars in its reserves. And that would actually discourage the speculative buyers. That would discourage the exporters who are not bringing in their export proceeds to Pakistan because they feel that the delayed this materialization of their LCs, it would give them more profit in rupees terms. So that sort of panic behaviors from consumers, that would finish, and that would at least stabilize the value of rupee if it doesn't appreciate.
Thank you very much, Dr. Abid Salari, for being guest in our program.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting.
Ladies and gentlemen, this was Dr. Abid Salari, a renowned economist of the country, explained some concepts to us and helped us to understand why Pakistan's grip on US dollars, the demand on US dollars going high, and why currency lost so much of value amid all the international changes that are happening. Another important point that he mentioned was regarding the imports, which are getting increasingly expensive and certainly causing as a major reason of devaluation of rupee in the country. A problem with devaluation of rupee is that it actually increases our internal as well as our external liabilities, that as a consequence put more pressure on our currency, as a consequence of which inflation goes further higher, as a consequence of which government has to deal with wider budget deficit, as a consequence of which we have to go to IMF, as a consequence of which we have to take unpopular decisions. And Pakistan is trapped in this vicious circle so far. We'll join you next week with another program. And until then, Allah Hafiz.